Thanks a lot. I'll have to be very brief, not like the last time. I want to say, first of all, thanks a lot to the Ambassador of Senegal. Because indeed, as she says, I contacted her and said, Ambassador, please, here is a task. We need to speak to President Macky Sall because here is a challenge. And indeed, she actually responded, which is not normal, Ambassador, to actually said, I have delivered your message. Thanks a lot, Ambassador. But really, I'm very, very proud of what President Macky Sall has done. I've worked with the President Macky Sall for quite a long time. So I was fairly confident when I spoke to him, I raised the matter with him to say, but here is a challenge, a common challenge we both of us understand. And this is how I think Senegal should behave. I'm really very, very proud of the manner in which he responded to that. Nobody has spoken to me about what to do about the DRC here at home. They haven't. I don't know why, but they haven't. Next month, Rwanda will be marking the 30th anniversary of the genocide. President Kagame has sent an invitation. I'll be going there because I think for us, all of us as Africans, that's an important anniversary to mark in order to address these issues about peace and stability on our continent. In a sense, the issue about peace, well, let me come at it differently. You'd recall that our colleagues in East Africa, this African community, decided to send a group into the Congo to help resolve the challenges in the Eastern Congo. It was led by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, he contacted me to say, I've been appointed in this thing, what do you think? So we discussed the matter, and indeed I told him what I thought, that the first challenge to overcome is to get the Congolese to understand that is a Congolese problem. It doesn't originate from outside of the Congo. You remember even when we had the negotiations with the Congolese, when they met here in Sun City to negotiate the transition to democracy and so on, one of the negotiating groups there was the RCD. And the RCD was an armed group. There were 3 armed groups. The RCD was one of them, which came out of the Kivus. Because of the population in the Kivus felt the need to defend itself. So it actually had an armed representative in the negotiations to negotiate the future of the Congo. As a reality that was understood by the Congolese themselves, they didn't say, RCD, you are not wanted here. So they were part of the solution. But I'm saying that I think the matter about this peace in the Eastern Congo, in the Eastern DRC, has become too factionalized. Because I saw somewhere on the television that somebody asked one of the Congolese, but the East Africans came here and so on, now we are getting the Southern Africans. What happened? And the response was, no, we don't want those, we didn't want those as East Africans, because they were very deceitful. They didn't tell us that, in fact, they supported Rwanda. Therefore, we chased them away. I immediately understood what he meant, because indeed, President Kenyatta leading that East African group, engaging the Congolese government, raised this thing to say, but the Rwandans in the Eastern Congo are Congolese. You've got to treat them as Congolese. That was interpreted as, therefore you are in support of Rwanda, go away. In a sense, you've got to find a way of depoliticizing the matter so that it can be dealt with objectively. In the first instance by the African Union, which is facing its own challenges. What I was trying to say with regard to our economy here, and why it's performed differently, is not that one colleague was saying, why, at what point did we drop the ball? We didn't drop any ball. As I say, you can just look at the statistics yourself, do the research yourselves, you're a university. Just look at what happened during this age one that Andres is talking about. The economy was performing very well. It was growing, levels of investment in the economy were growing, levels of numbers of people employed were growing. We even had something we're looking at with my colleague as we're coming here. There's a few years where we actually had budget surpluses. And you have a budget surplus in order to generate resources, not to pay the money lenders, but to build schools and clinics and roads and so on. And the report says this was the first time since 1913 that this country had budget surpluses for the very first time in an entire century. To generate the resources to be able to attend to the matter of the upliftment of our people. Instead of paying the bankers because you owe them too much money. We didn't drop the ball. But somebody else intervened to produce a negative result. Assisted by people within our ranks, who in fact were not part of us. They wore the same T-shirts and I think that this thing about optimism, starting here at home, you know, the ANC has said in a number of conferences, the ANC must renew itself. And it says for its own survival. It's a very, very important statement made by National Conference of the ANC. It's because those delegates understood what was going wrong. That something had happened to the quality of the membership of the ANC, such that even the character of the ANC was changing because of what is happening to that membership. And they said, renew for your own survival. That is an ANC decision. That challenge remains. But the point I'm raising it is because I think that's part of what drives my sense of confidence. That there are still many people in the ANC who know very well that something's wrong. And therefore something needs to be done. And identify the thing that is wrong correctly. And it's not difficult. It's been identified in successive conferences. I've seen documents prepared by our veterans which look at our ANC conferences since 1997. National conferences, NGCs, policy conferences, and all of them up to date say one thing. And they say the quality of the membership of the ANC has declined. That since ANC became government, you had too many staff riders. People who came in because this was an opportunity to get a job in government and to steal and put something in your pocket. And yeah, there are members of the ANC wearing ANC t-shirts. So when the membership itself says we need to renew ourselves, it communicates a message that there is hope. That there are people, there are ordinary members of the ANC who are saying there's something wrong here. And I think that is a sentiment that would be shared by the generality of our population. If you went to the population and said, dear population, look what we've done. We've removed all of the thieves who've been leading the branches of the ANC. They're all gone. The population would give you a standing ovation. I think that's what gives hope. If you look at, I talked earlier about what Kosatu had described as an investment strike. But a very, very interesting phenomenon is that during 2020, as the COVID-19 pandemic starts, the government puts out an economic reconstruction and renewal, whatever, economic plan. 2010. Business did the same thing. Its own plan for economic renewal. Both of which were supposed to serve within the NEDLEC process. So the business people they submitted their plan to government, which would bring it into the NEDLEC process. And what I found really, truly remarkable in that business proposal was that business, well, let me start somewhere else. It was a meeting of the ANC where I say, I have read the government economic report. It is 32 pages. I've read the business report. It's 132 pages. So I say it's clear to me that more work has been done by business in terms of what are the steps to be taken to really revive this economy. And the President Ramaphosa, at the end of that discussion, said, well, Comrade Thabo is correct. A business did do their plan, but what he is wrong about is the length. He says 132 pages. In fact, it's 1,000 pages. Which illustrated exactly the point that business had done a lot of detailed work and said this plan we're proposing would cost 3 trillion rand over 3 years. We as a private sector commit ourselves to spend 1 trillion rand. This was the very, very first time since 1994 that the private sector made a commitment of that kind. And 1 trillion rand over 3 years, they said 1 trillion rand over 3 years. At the end of the 3 years, of course, we'll do more planning. But that was a very, very serious commitment to help to create these factories and mines and this that we need. That's part of what gives me optimism, that clearly there's a change in the thinking of some of the business leaders so that they could make a commitment of that kind in writing. That it's similar to we went to, we have my sister here who's sitting in the front row. She comes from the embassy of Guinea-Conakry. Our last Africa Day lecture, it was Africa Day last year, was in Guinea-Conakry. So she was our host in Conakry. At the end of that lecture, part of what we did was to address some of the universities around Conakry. And our lecturer, himself a Guinean, said, arising out of these discussions with these African students, the Guinean students, that it's therefore absolutely imperative that we must work to revive the African Renaissance movement. Because these young Guineans were saying, here are the changes that are facing us on the continent. And for that, in order to respond to these challenges, we need this Renaissance movement. And he promised that he was going to start immediately, starting with those students in Conakry, to build that. That's why I'm saying, even about the African Renaissance on the continent, I'm hopeful because the people, the masses of the people of our continent, still have that vision. I think part of what's happened at the point of the leadership, there's been obviously a decline in the commitment to Pan-Africanism among our leadership across the board. That includes South Africa. There's been a reduction in that commitment, that Pan-Africanist commitment. And therefore a reduction in the focus on these issues about the African Renaissance, for instance. Even now there is a discussion, the new commission, the Commission of the African Union, will be re-elected in January next year. So there's a hot discussion going on now about the processes for the election of that AU commission. And I think if you stay close enough to the AU, you would understand why that's a hot issue. Because you have these conflicts taking place on the continent. The conflicts in the Sahel. The conflict in Sudan. Sudan is tearing itself apart. Quarrel now, today, between Ethiopia and Somalia. The conflict in northern Mozambique, or the eastern Congo, or Libya. And you look at those and you say, where is the AU? And ask anybody to challenge you to say, this is what the AU is doing about this, that, and that. Nowhere to be seen. There's something wrong there. But I'm saying that the sentiment among the young people, like the sentiment we picked up in Guinea-Conakry from the young people, was the importance of this Renaissance and the need for them to reconstruct that movement so that this becomes an agent of change. I think that's what gives hope. To produce something different, here I think must start, as I was saying, with the understanding of our reality. And my challenge to members of the ANC would be to say, very, very critical in terms of producing something different, is to do what the conference has said, a genuine process of the renewal of the ANC. Part of what is problematic about it, that renewal, is I sitting in some senior position in the ANC, am not sure that I can survive the renewal process. It might identify me and say, this is one of the ones we don't want. So I will therefore block the process of renewal because it affects me personally. But I'm saying the challenge I would make to the ANC is that let's implement what conference has said. This renewal. And you can't say it's now been possible to convene a branch of the ANC, which has not held, we had not met for 2 years. It's now meeting. Therefore, that's a renewal. It's not. Who are these people who are meeting? They may correct 1,000,000 times, but who are they? Are they the same people who are busy destroying SARS and are busy correcting an ANC branch? I think something different will come from that process. And that would include to produce something different, really to implement what was commonly agreed in 2020. That the problems facing the country require all of us to join hands. That business, government, labor, civil society, let's work together. This social compact. With all of the work that was done, it was never achieved. And yet that is the only way to pull the country out of what it is. 70% of new investment in the South African economy, historically, has come from the private sector. You can't rely only on the public sector to generate this economy. Where the private sector produces 70% of new investment, you can't do without it. And where the private sector agreed, as it agreed in terms of the social compact, let's work together to define what is to be done. I think we didn't quite take advantage of that opportunity. That's one of the things that is outstanding, to do something different about this country, to produce that social compact. Indeed, what our colleagues were saying there, we want a society where there's no tribalism, no gender-based violence, and all of these things gone. Even in terms of education. And part of the tragedy, our tragedy, in my view, is that in reality, as a country, we've got policies on all of these issues. I don't know of any issue where we don't have a good policy. But something goes wrong somewhere. The policy remains policy, the practice is very different. How do we cure that? Issue of crime, for instance, is raised quite correctly. And the positions of the country, the positions are correct. But something went wrong. For instance, you remember the ministry responsible for this was the Minister of Safety and Security. And then at some point they changed it. It became the Minister of Police. So we got a Minister of Police instead of Minister of Safety and Security. And then you had National Commissioner of Police, provincial commissioners, inspectors, and this, that changed. They became generals and colonels and military ranks. I'm saying the policy to make sure that the citizens enjoy safety and security. The policies are there. But when you take this instrument and militarize it, and you begin to produce slogans like shoot to kill, that's what soldiers do, that's not what police do. Yeah. I'm saying the policies, in many of these issues are there. We've got to attend to this matter. Where are the institutions? And therefore the people, the warm bodies, practically to make sure that these correct policies are implemented. That's a challenge. But thanks a lot.